Celtic Stuff Live.
Welcome to Celtic Stuff Live on the CLNS Media Network, the leading online provider of audio and video coverage for the Boston Celtics. I'm your host, Justin Poulin. Joining me is John Duke, and the Celtics preseason is over. We're going to table that, though, for the second half of the show because a big announcement this week. That's right. Kyrie says, and this is at season ticket holder night, Kyrie says he will re-sign with the Celtics next summer. Don't ask him about the money. And obviously, if the Celtics will have me, that's a nice, humble way to say that, but I'm sure that they will. Just stay healthy, Kyrie. That he will be back. And obviously this dovetails into a whole host of other conversations. But John, it really substantiates something that you really felt very confident about. I said, well, we'll see. It's not contract negotiation time, but we got a really good vibe about it a little over a week ago. Then he comes in really strong this time. And I think at this point, you're 100% right. He has no intentions of going anywhere. And I don't know why, if he wasn't sincere, he would double down on it in front of the media. That's just asking for problems. So clearly he loves the city, loves the franchise. And I know that the team is headed in the right direction, obviously. Biggest, odds on favorite, number 2 in the league to, going to the finals. Not quite as much of a odds on favorite as the Golden State Warriors. No surprise there, but a team headed in the right direction. So it's really easy to say you'll come back, but I also almost get the sense that if this team wasn't even quite as successful and built as well as it was today, that Kyrie would probably be coming back anyway.
Yeah, I mean, everything is set up here well for him. There's, as you said, you can take the team apart from that. He's in a major market. He's in one of the real important franchises in the league. I mean, there's certainly the whole New York, LA thing. There's the warm weather piece. There's the tax, issues. But when you look at the meat and potatoes, the heart of the league, there's Boston, there's the Lakers, and then it gets a little dicey. The Knicks, the Pistons, I don't think so. So, you start to look at really where you are and in terms of being a marquee franchise, and for you to be the star of a marquee franchise, that's pretty easy choice. And then on top of that, you've got a brand new workout facility, a training facility the team opened up with partnering with New Balance and the Red Auerbach Center. It's all there for him. And then, oh, by the way, let's put onto that, as you said, where the team sits. And not just where the team sits today, but where the team will look to sit over the next 2, 3, 4, maybe even, into the next decade. And that's really where I think Kyrie's looking. And yeah, there's some questions. He's got the knee. Whether he will be able to stay healthy throughout that next contract, I think there's certainly concerns about that. But right now, the fact that he's willing to stay here is huge. It's huge for this year's team. It takes that whole question off the table. It allows them to plan for next summer, allows us to talk about Terry Rozier, and it also allows us to talk about even bigger fish out there. And knowing that Kyrie Irving, it may be, he may be one of the best pre-agency recruiters that there is out there. A lot of guys love Kyrie. He's a USA basketball guy. And that's going to be really important as the Celtics
sells shoes too, like a champ, right? Nothing better than to be around, if you're like a Jason Tatum, right? You're young in your career. You want to get to that point. That's where a lot of the money is made in this game. And sort of be around Kyrie and those people and those businessmen. That's a good thing for your career too, for later on, especially when the torch gets passed. And, so we'll see how all that plays out, but I'm not so concerned about that contract or the knee on the next contract because he is so young and because the knee was fine except for they really needed to go in and remove some screws. I actually feel really confident that health wise he'll be fine as long as he has the right supporting cast, as long as they're able to manage those minutes. And right now they're very much set up that way, especially when you watch the preseason, you look at somebody like Gordon Hayward. I know we'll get to this in the second half, but he really sets up the offense. We saw a lot more of that as preseason went on, where he's at the top of the key and he's kind of dribbling and searching to make the right pass. I think taking some of that off of Kyrie's shoulders will definitely be helpful. And you mentioned Terry, so I guess I'll put this back to you, John. You want to start with the big fish and work our way down, or do you want to start with the small? And again, I love Terry, so I have a hard time calling him the small fish, but do you want to start with the small fish and work your way up?
I think that's a good way to go, because Terry, we know, is a conversation piece that the Celtics need to entertain right now. I wouldn't move him personally. I think you go to the end, unless you can get that magical offer. And as we're recording this just a few hours after the Suns have let Ryan McDonough go, former Celtics assistant GM. And the Suns are a team that is obviously in need of a point guard. Sarver, the owner, Robert Sarver, has been very involved. Who knows what that means? Will the Celtics get involved? Will, Phoenix, just do something stupid and pay way too much for a point guard? We'll see. We did go through this is the third time it would be that we've gone into a deal with Phoenix over point guards. The last time, obviously, was Isaiah Thomas. And then before that, of course, infamously, the Celtics buying the pick to get Rondo. So it would be somewhat interesting if we were sending actually Rozier back to Phoenix. But I think it only happens if it's an incredible deal, the type of deal where it would be foolish, almost malpractice on Ainge's part to turn it down. I think they want to keep him, but I just don't see the role for him after this year.
Right. How can they keep him happy? I mean, here's a player clearly deserving of, if not starter minutes, major minutes off the bench. And he is getting that. But if you sign Kyrie to that long-term deal, if you're Terry, you're never coming out from underneath that shadow, most likely. I mean, there's a chance if they had to trade Jaylen Brown or they make a big move during the season that doesn't involve Terry, I could easily see Kyrie and Terry in the backcourt, but they get really small. One of the advantages this club has constructed today is just how long they are. We've watched a very undersized Celtics team year after year after year prior to them trading Avery Bradley and trading Isaiah Thomas. And now all of a sudden they have this long team that still can't rebound somehow. And we'll talk about that too. But, it's very, I think it's got to be style of play related. I'll just put that little asterisk there, but it would be really kind of a surprise to see them trade a Brown. But if they are trying to land that bigger fish that we're working our way towards, we could also be talking, Terry and Brown. And then you see Marcus Smart is all of a sudden in that starting lineup. And there's another player who's now been locked up, but really does deserve those type of starter minutes at times. I think the biggest thing holding him back is the offense, but lots of guards and I just don't see how they could spend that much money knowing that Brown and Tatum are going to be coming up and looking for big money themselves.
Well, and of course the fact is that let's just go there since we're kind of nibbling at the edges of the big fish. To make it a major deal for an all-star, they're going to have to include Smart's money in it to make it work. So they're going to be in a difficult spot in that, let's say, you move Terry and you move Marcus to get the big fish. There's not a lot behind you. Now, you'd hope you'd have some other picks. Obviously, the Celtics could potentially have as many as 4 picks in the first round this year. I don't know that I'd say that this was a heavy point guard draft. So I don't know that this is going to be the year to really restock the cupboard of young point guards. But it's going to be one where I think, you take the swings and where the Celtics will pick, even if it's, let's say, the 9th pick from Memphis or the 16th pick from the Clippers, you're going to, you can probably get somebody there. And what are we talking about? We're talking about somebody who's playing 3rd guard, 4th guard minutes, next year. So that's not that difficult to come back from. But really what we're talking about, when we're talking about the big fish, we're talking about Jay King, friend of the show, one-time member of this Fine Fair podcast as we traded him and signed
There's
him
too
from
many
waivers.
J's, right? Too many J's. So they just carved it right off and said "Rain in J's" there,
That's
so.
right. We're the original Jays, by the way.
We are the
OGs.
original Jays. Yep. And
we're the OGs or the OJs, depending upon how you want to look at it.
Orange juice. All right. I'll go with that.
Yeah.
All right. Before we get into Anthony Davis and the secondary Jays. I don't know. I don't have a witty remark there, but I just want to remind everybody you can follow Celtics Stuff Live on Twitter at CSL_tweet live. You can follow me at CSL_Justin. John is at CSL_Duke, and the entire CLNS Media Network at CLNS Media. Facebook.com/CLNS fans. Download the CLNS Media app for iOS and Android. Simply search CLNS Media in your app marketplace. Finally, the YouTube channel, youtube.com/CLNS Media for high definition, full length locker room interviews and the Garden Report and the round table and all of the post game content. Just tons and tons going on at the YouTube channel, as well as us, John. We're there. And every week you can find short clips of this podcast and video along with us. So if you're listening on the podcast, make sure you check out youtube.com. We are one of the channels or one of the playlists underneath CLNS Media's YouTube channel. So, all right, John, now take it away. Set the table for Anthony Davis conversation.
Wow. Set the table. Well, and one thing we should also add to that little read is we're also soon will be on Spotify too. So that's a pretty cool little thing.
Not soon. We're there.
Oh, we're there. I didn't see we were up yet. So
we are there. Yep.
Well, there you go. So Spotify, here we are. Look, it's Anthony Davis. Anthony Davis is the next star to move. There's been a lot of talk recently because he recently fired his agent. He's now with Rich Paul in Clutch Sports, which is LeBron's company, the firm that's not only run by LeBron but also represents him. And there's been some thought, well, it means he'll just automatically is going to the Lakers. I think there's a push-pull. I think that we obviously know that there is a close connection between Kyrie and Anthony Davis. I think that the Celtics have a very good chance. I think the Celtics have the best package they could offer for what New Orleans would want. And, if Anthony is flipping coins and he can go to a team that he can win now, whereas where you look at the Lakers, what it will take for them to get him will basically take them out of the mix of being able to be competitive. The Celtics can put together a strong package, get Davis, and then probably push them even further beyond Golden State. So to me, it's an obvious fit.
Further beyond Golden State.
Well, put them beyond
and then beyond Golden State.
Yes, thank you. That's a better way to put it. You're absolutely right. And so then, then that's...
Is that when we'll be a rebounding team?
No, because we're still going to play we still have four smalls out there with him. Potentially, he'd be out there with Horford. But, there's a question, I suppose, is what the package would be. Whether or not you'd have to include Brown, would you, how many of the picks? Tatum's off the table. I think under any circumstance, there's no way you're trading Jason Tatum. But it's, that's where it is. That's what we're going to be talking about here, I think, the next 12 months. Thank God we're not talking about anymore about Kyrie Irving. It's all going to be about Anthony Davis, and bringing the Brow to Boston.
And everybody getting upset about what we're giving up, right? And somebody like Jaylen Brown, who he's so interesting because he still doesn't fully play with it himself, but they're doing such a good job of having him run those backdoor cuts and work off the ball. And he is cutting, and there's so much passing on this team that when he doesn't try to create a play, it's going very well for him. When he tries to create a play, most of the time, it gets pretty ugly. He's got to be kind of in motion. They have to be taking advantage of his athleticism. And so, it may be easier and easier for this team to give up somebody like Jaylen Brown in a deal like that.
Yeah. I would say that if you're going by what we've seen last, Jason Tatum had as rough a preseason as well. We're going to get into talking about the preseason.
No, you're right. It's been ugly. Yep.
It's been really bad I think both guys haven't really shown themselves to be. I think Tatum had a nice quarter in the second game, and Brown had a stretch there, but they've really, both of them have not had a great preseason. But they're not alone in that regard. What I'd like to see, I think, but if you take that aside and you look at where they are and what we saw last year, Brown is probably the easier to let go of, not because you feel like he's stifled here. His ability to do what he could do if he becomes a star and wants to be a star, it's just next to impossible for him to do that in Boston. Playing next to Tatum, playing with Kyrie, playing with Hayward, it's just, and potentially next to Brow, you don't see how it all comes together possibly. And that's not from anyone wanting to get rid of Jaylen Brown. I'm sure you don't want to get rid of Jaylen Brown, being you were on the right side of that one.
Yeah, I want to see him develop here for sure. And I really want to see him play that shooting guard position and play it alongside of Tatum. I mean, I think ultimately Tatum finds his way back to the small forward position in the middle of his career. It's just the way that this roster plays out. I think we'll see him playing a decent amount of power forward, but you're right. I don't want to see him go. I'm not excited to see him go. I definitely would prefer that Jaylen stick around and not be the guy that's traded. You mentioned Smart, and that might have to be, the contract piece, but we don't know how expensive it'll get to bring him in. And even the way Jay King and a lot of the articles have kind of written the whole Anthony Davis thing is like, oh, they would wait for his contract to expire. And I just don't see that. I think it'll have to be a trade. And, that conversation between Kyrie and Anthony Davis is really kind of saying like, look, we're running out of time. So if they're going to give up the kind of assets that are required to control your future, then it's going to have to be pretty solid on the sly, right? Because it can't be tampering. It's got to be pretty solid on the sly that you and I want to hang out. And I think that is why I'm going to tell you that particular rumor was, if it was leaked from anybody in Anthony Davis's camp, it was leaked on purpose. That whole conversation, there's no surprise there. So, all right. Well, I'm going to tell you about 1 in 100. Hey, Boston sports fans, do you want to get killer seats to see your favorite team for the price of a beer or a large pizza? Tired of paying for all the inflated markups from brokers or last minute convenience charges just so you end up paying courtside prices for those nosebleed seats? Go to 1 in 100. That's ONEIN100.co. Feeling lucky? Try it out now. There's no other place online that's doing online raffles to win tickets to events. It's a totally new way to score tickets to your favorite events and a new way to score Boston Celtics tickets, which is coming right up next week. The cost to potentially score tickets with 1 in 100 is a small fraction of the actual ticket price. You can score a pair of tickets for less than the cost of a beer. Your first raffle ticket is free after you sign up, and the experience of using 1 in 100 is extremely fun and exciting. From picking your lucky number, 17, to the feeling of potentially scoring premium tickets. Feeling lucky? Try it. 1in100.co. That's ONEIN100.co. All right, John. So let's tie this in to, this whole conversation about, how does the roster construct itself if somebody like Anthony Davis were to come. There's going to be so much Anthony Davis talk. I feel like we better not go so deep into it that we don't have it on the table, because this will be one of those January to March sort of, I don't want to call them doldrums, but you kind of know what the team is by January. They tend to suffer some hiccups. Things get a little bit more exciting again when you hit, the All-Star break and that stretch when you're really trying to determine seeding. And then we're all preparing for the postseason. So the Anthony Davis talk is really going to be around that mid-season January to March kind of stretch. So having said that, we'll table it. I think we need to talk about the Celtics 1-3 postseason performance. We obviously have to talk about Marcus in game number 4 And as you said, we look at Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum really struggling this preseason.
Oh, it's been awful. I mean, really, it's been probably the worst preseason that I can remember these Celtics playing. In I mean, all the years that I've done this, I can't think of a more disappointing start to the season than what we've seen. And that's really a function of sky high expectations. I mean, we're all going in expecting these guys to play like the 15 Warriors, and that's not reasonable on anybody's account. But I think that you'd like to see a lot more effort. And you'd like to see some shots fall. I mean, the shooting has just been absolutely horrendous. And, of course, part of it is that when you miss shots, that creates long rebounds, and long rebounds create, really, transition opportunities for the team. And then, you're not in good position, and you're reaching and you're fouling. And it all kind of comes off of that. But, there's also been a lot of lax defense. You don't want to overreact. You don't want to overreact to preseason. But, I think we saw with Brad's comments after the game, the third preseason game, the home game against Cleveland. Very disappointed, very, kind of, disgusted, I guess, with the effort. And I can't say I disagree with him in any respect. It was better, I thought, in part against Cleveland, in Cleveland. But again, it was really not great. And there was a quote that he had, on, I think it was to Celtics.com on Sunday, where he said, the best things that we're doing so far have been, undercover, effectively paraphrasing. The idea is like, we're making progress, but no one's seeing it. But that in and of itself is a bit worrying. So I'll take the credit. I'll take the good.
Yeah, but what
he's
do you
saying,
think is the
but
deal?
The fact they can't see it is a real problem.
Yeah.
I mean, that's frustrating as hell.
It is, because some of these players really made leaps last year. And yeah, it's Hayward and Kyrie that are coming back after not finishing out the year. Gordon's obviously struggling with lift on his shot, and I think that's why it's not really quite falling, especially, coming off a screen and just in motion. It's like when he's at the free throw line, he looks like he always did. But I just think a lot of that's, sort of game shape and repetitions and just finding that muscle memory and establishing game day strength, not only in the ankle, but just from a fatigue and energy standpoint, right? And he does so many other things, handling the ball. He's getting up there and getting the rebounds. He definitely had, a couple of athletic plays where, he blocked somebody from behind, right? We talked about that on the last show. So, I don't think I don't want to characterize the ankle as like he's not fully rehabbed and that's why his shot's not going down. I just don't think he's had enough repetition in the game setting with that ankle to really get the muscle memory where, when he gets his feet set and goes up into a shot, that he's quite as precise with that motion as he was prior to the injury. But I bet a month into the season, he's back where he always was from that standpoint. So I don't really understand how this team isn't playing well. And the bench unit, the guys that are coming off, I understand maybe a little bit with the rotations, but the guys that are coming out there are the guys that finished last year in heroic fashion. And then they can't, there's no gel. There's no chemistry. How is that possible?
I don't think, I think it's because they're individuals right now. They went off as a group of individuals over the summer. Jaylen, walked the earth, like the dude from Kung Fu. And, Jason, was all over the place. They worked on their games. They did great stuff individually, but you got to do it in a team concept. And Marcus Smart, who we'll talk about here in a second, made a comment after that game on Thursday where he said, guys go and they do work, but they don't practice their defense in the summer. They forget about it. And, I think that's a big part of it, is just getting back in the lab and working on the defensive end. I think a lot of it will come from that. Remember, they played their first game 4 days after they started camp. So it's not like they haven't been playing, and it's not like, but the timing of this has been very weird, and the game started so soon after they started camp. It's not an excuse necessarily, but I feel like there should be a lot of growth in the 90s away from these preseason games that should give Brad enough time, hopefully, to find some momentum with this group. But the other piece also, though, is so you got the individuals, and I think the other piece you got to look at when you're trying to figure out why is that, there's a sense of entitlement is natural with all that's expected of this team. But just like what happened with 2 years ago, that team that Isaiah kind of returned from and they added Horford, they were supposed to be the number one defensive team in the league, and they weren't anywhere close to start the season. They had to figure out how to grind out games and how to get there. That could be, what happens here. There's a shorter preseason. There's a shorter amount of time for training camp. It's just going to be more
Not
into
a lot
the
of
season
practices.
where they're actually building that cohesion together.
Yeah, not a lot of practices before they ended up actually playing games, and probably not that many practices in between sets between the Hornets and between Cleveland either. They're going to have a full week before the season starts, and I will add too, it almost seemed like, remember, we were always concerned about the back-to-backs and not getting any rest, and yet this team for the last several years under Brad Stevens seems to do better. I mean, there was 1 year before Kyrie where their record on the second night of back-to-backs was like ludicrous. They were a better team with a better winning percentage on the second night of back-to-backs. But even then, it's like the tougher schedule for some reason with this roster has always benefited them. They're always better during that stretch. And then when they have nights off and everything else, it's like they fall out of their rhythm. And we've always chalked that up to the fact that there's just so many young players on this squad. And so again, staying in rhythm is really important versus the vets who've just had, that kind of experience and can just kind of do that. But with so many young players contributing in big ways and for large minutes, that maybe that's what it is. But I can't come up with another theory, to be honest with you, John. I don't know how else to explain it. It just seems like they have to play a lot to be good.
Yeah. Well, and I think that I think goes back to the Hayward piece as well. I feel like Kyrie looks pretty close to who he is, and I think, we'll get there. I think Hayward, it's going to take time. I think clearly his timing, his flow, his feel for the game is just off. And, he said that when they took the screws out, it kind of set him back and kind of almost a reset button when we went through that in late May and early June. So he's really 2 months behind where he should be. So really this is where he should be, early August. So, by the time we get to Christmas, that may be the type of guy we were expecting to see as we started camp, and that's okay. I'm okay with that. This is a season about May and June, but for a team that we're expecting to be, the world beater right out of the way, it's probably unrealistic. And I think, it's going to take Hayward some time, and it does kind of make me think that perhaps they should move him to the bench. Not to go back down the road of talking about the starting lineup once again, but he just doesn't feel comfortable. He doesn't look comfortable. And I think it's more important to get that core together. We talked a little bit about this last time. Get that core together. Try to get the players who are at least healthy back in the same kind of fold and then bring Hayward into it, as opposed to trying to fix everything at once. It just feels like
you
that's
want him to be the guy who's running the offense off the bench? Is that kind of what you're thinking? Is use him as a facilitator, have him be able to get those rebounds, and then, maybe put the ball in his hands more to help him get into the flow versus in that starting lineup. He's got to put the ball in Kyrie's hands to some extent. I guess there's plenty of ball handling opportunities though. If you've got Terry and Marcus, not in that lineup, who else really handles the ball? I mean, Tatum a little bit, but not really. Yeah. Never Brown, and, Horford does, I suppose, but only for short stints, not for any kind of extended. So from that aspect, I almost feel like it makes more sense to keep him in the starting lineup and just have him contribute in more of a facilitator role and expect more out of Brown and Tatum on the offensive end.
Yeah, well, I think that could work. To me, I want him in low leverage situations to start against players that aren't as complete. And I feel like, he was against Cleveland, he's going up against Love. These are things that would challenge him if he was healthy, not necessarily attacking Love, but perhaps defending Love. Yeah, I'd like to see him perhaps against, a team's third best swing guy, get confidence back, and then find ways to get everybody out.
Attacking Love and defending Love is just a funny thing to say. All right, let's wrap this one on Marcus Smart and the ejection in the final game of the preseason. Pretty early to go, too. What was the score? Like 12-10, 12-8, something like that? 15-12 is somewhere in that range. The game had just kind of got going in the first quarter, and then man, what is up with J.R. Smith and his thug ways with the Celtics? He's just out of control. And it just seems way too early in the season to be instigating. Having said that, Marcus Smart earned his fine, regardless of the unfortunate circumstances around his mother and him denying emotional vulnerability. I will agree, Marcus, this is definitely who you are, and you're a bulldog, but I definitely am also taking into consideration that it's preseason, and I'm going to counterbalance that with, he's obviously hurting, and makes him, it wasn't, the foul wasn't committed on him. The foul was 100% committed on what was it, Baines in the back, or I guess they tussled up arms, and then JR kind of pushed him, and it is what it is. Marcus made it his fight. And for a preseason game, it probably wasn't 100% necessary, but there's an element of history there with JR that, you knew Marcus was going to be the guy. I mean, this is the guy who punched a hole through a painting or a picture or whatever on the road last year. I mean, he's got a little volatility to him, and he's the enforcer. I mean, if this was hockey, he's the guy you bring off the bench to go start throwing people into the boards and making them pay.
So yes, absolutely. And let's set the stage properly. J.R. Smith, he is a thug. He is a cheap shot artist. He is also the guy who single-handedly cost the Cavs game 1 of the finals last year. He is one of the more detestable players that play in the NBA. I have not enjoyed the J.R. Smith experience at all, ever. So then, he started doing the cheap shots on Jay Crowder 3 years ago. And, it's been a long run of this stuff from him. And Smart just got sick of it. He's like, you know what? I'm going to take care of this. The problem is that Smart's got to be, smarter about those situations. He's got to be aware. If Aaron Baines is that frustrated, he could take J.R. Smith, break him in half, and throw him to the sideline. I mean, Aaron doesn't need that backup, but that's Marcus. Marcus has got his guys back, and that's why they love him. It's why he's there. It's why he's worth well more than what they're paying him for the $13 million a year. And he's the heart and soul of the team. You just don't want to see that become an issue where you lose games when it matters. J.R. Smith deserved it, and I think the fines, bore out that, yes, Smart was overly aggressive. $25,000. Come on. To actually fine J.R. Smith when he was only given a double foul says, I think, all it needs to say about the NBA saying, no, you bear responsibility here, JR. And I just wish they'd finally suspend the guy.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not like the league doesn't know the history. They've looked into these things over and over, and the last thing that they want is, something to happen again like it happened in Detroit. Right? They've got to keep an eye on this stuff, and it was easy for them to make a statement in the preseason and hand out these fines, and the ejection. But you're right. At some point, there needs to be some suspensions. I think if it was the regular season, it might have gotten a little bit uglier. And I think because it's the preseason, this one slides a little bit. But make no mistake, Marcus Smart wanted to throw a punch, and had they been closer, might have landed one. And you can guarantee suspension in that case. And he was close. And I don't, I think he's self-restrained. If you watch the video, it's like he's going to go throw a punch. He's too far away, and the delay in time has him not really back down, but definitely think twice about trying to connect with that punch. And then Terry and Tatum, they saw the same thing I think you'll see if you watch that video, which is why they tackled him and brought him to the ground. But I think he actually had mental control over himself before they tackled him. It was just, if you look like you're going to throw punches, you can't just all of a sudden cool off. And the rest of it, I think, was just kind of, played out because it needed to.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, he not he didn't do the typical NBA thing where you put your hand out and you start pointing. I mean, he had his hands at his sides like he was, I don't know. It was kind of funny. I was watching it in a Buffalo Wild Wings with 45 other parents or other fellow soccer players of my son, his teammates, and going ham. I mean, we were going crazy about this. And of course, everyone's looking at me.
In preseason. It's totally preseason. Yeah.
They're going nuts, and this is, and I started explaining J.R. Smith to them and what the deal is. And, everyone's loving it, of course, and it sets the tone. It sets the tone for the year. I wish it kind of forced the Celtics to play better the rest of the night, but, alas, it didn't happen. I'm just waiting. We're going to talk about the season and some expectations in our show next week, which will be the season preview, I suppose. But, I just look at that night, and if you needed something, a swift kick in the pants, Smart being there for those teammates, that's exactly what you need to have. Okay. Now you need to play better. Now you need to show each other that you have each other's back instead of just kind of jacking threes and, having absolutely zero flow to what you're doing out there.
No hustle. There's definitely a hustle issue that's going on. And you're right. When we come back next week, we will talk, basically our season previews. And based on what we saw in the preseason, I expect you and I to be a little more toned down, but we've had some enthusiastic season previews in the past. And, so it'll be interesting to see what the difference a week makes. Lots of hype this past week with Kyrie and rumors around Anthony Davis. A great show all around, and we will be back, like John said, in just a week. So that's going to do it for this week's show. Broadcast will be available on demand on the CLNS Media mobile app. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter at CSL_Justin and at CSL_Duke. A heartfelt thank you to everybody for tuning in. And remember, you can support the show by subscribing to Celtic Stuff Live on iTunes and Stitcher. We'd love it if you gave us a rating and a review because your feedback is important to the show. For staff writer Samuel Elias, executive producer Larry H. Russell, the founder of CLNS Media, Nick Gelso, and my co-host John Duke, I'm Justin Poulin. Thank you for listening to this week's edition of Celtic Stuff Live.
Celtic Stuff Live.